moment. I'm trying to connect. Alrighty, I think we are in. Let me just confirm on the LinkedIn end. Give me a moment as we wait for everyone else to join in. Just give me a second.
Okay.
So it says they are waiting for me to start it. I thought I'd already started it. So let's give it a countdown. Alrighty, I think we are now almost like I could see it on LinkedIn on the other end loading.
Oh,
I'll just edit.
okay.
Or all right, I see what you mean, Rose. There actually is a lag. Let me just start the timer again, then we can see.
Okay.
Alrighty, Rose. Karibu sana. Welcome. We are live. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for joining the audience today. I know it's well past working hours, so thank you so much for making the time. And to our audience, karibuni sana. Oh, Kiswahili, gosh, I need to remember to speak in all languages. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon from wherever you're joining us. My name is Noeline. I am a supply chain professional and an operational excellence specialist. I am also the curator of Safe Space. Safe Space is meant to be a learning space on LinkedIn, free virtual learning space on LinkedIn, where I join with subject matter experts and they get to share with us their knowledge and they get to answer our questions on different topics. And today we are joined by Rose. Thank you, Rose, for joining. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Hi,
for having me. Hi.
how are you?
I'm doing good. Been a hectic day, but I'm doing well
Mhm.
and I'm really happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Alrighty, thank you. So, Rose, our subject matter expert of today, is an experienced professional with over 14 years of experience in talent advisory, project management, and business consulting. Rose has helped numerous organizations find the right talent to drive their growth. She has filled several executive and senior level roles in operations, sales, finance, HR, and tech across different sectors. She is a certified life coach and studied computer science for her bachelor's degree. So, Rose, who better to have as a SME or navigating career transitions?
Well,
Considering
thank
you
you.
as Mhm. Thank
Yeah,
you.
that's
Thank you
true.
so
Thank you
much.
so much.
Alrighty. So today, Rose, we are speaking about navigating through transitions, career transitions, and this is coming from a follow-up question from a previous session that we had, where there was one of the joiners who was sharing that they're in the banking sector. They want to transition into the project management space, and they were trying to find out, is it feasible? Can I do this? How do I do this? Well, I'm not the subject matter expert. That is why you're here. And I will hand it over to you to explain to us what is your definition of a career transition.
Thank you so much, Nolene, for having me today and discussing this very interesting topic, which can be very it's interesting in its own way. Let me put it that way. So career transitions can be looked at in different ways. There's transitioning from one job role to another. Some people define it that way, even though the definition could be job change. And there are those who define career transition specifically around transitioning from one career path to a different career path. So say you are in finance and you decide you want to do a bit of sales. So that's considered like a career transition. And of course, there's different levels of transitions, and transitions are part of life. They are pretty difficult in their own way, but I think with a lot of determination and a lot of tools, you can navigate transitions very well, whether it's career or even just personal. Different types of transitions that we go through in life. So transitions are normal. Day to day life, there's always transitions, but when we talk about career transitions, is around work transitions. So either moving from one role to another, whether it's from junior to senior, or lateral, where you're moving from one organization to another, but in the same position. You're changing organizations. You're changing the type of work that you're doing on a day to day basis. So that's how I would define career transitions.
Okay, so as long as you're moving roles, you just need to figure out what kind of transition am I making? Am I transitioning laterally, like you said, or diagonally or vertically? If I've
Yeah.
understood you correctly. All right. So suppose Rose, as an individual or as the person who had asked the question, you decide, yes, I think I want to switch completely. I was in IT. I'm like, that's it. I think I want to move into banking. And it can look like anything, like you've said. The next question for me would be, what are some of the common challenges that we face as individuals when transitioning between careers, and how can we overcome the challenges, sorry, not the transitions?
Okay. It's a very good question and a very good starting point to the conversation. Um, I would look at the challenges when transitioning between careers in two ways, sort of in two categories. So one category is around what I have control of, and then there's category of what is external to which I have no control of. So what I have control of in terms of challenges would be sometimes you'll find you're not very clear about what exactly you want to do. You're not very clear about where you want to go, what role you want to move into. So that can be a challenge because without a without a goal, basically you're just walking in the dark. And so having a goal of why you want to transition, what you're transitioning to, helps. And even looking at where you are, we usually say that when you're doing like your strategy, whether it's personal or even organization wide, you have to evaluate where you are now and evaluate where you want to be. So what is within your control is that you're able to really honestly have a deep dive into yourself and say, okay, this is where I am now. And this is what I want to transition into. And when you look at this is where I am now, it's, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What is the work environment I am in? Why do I even want transition in the first place? What are my reasons? And even just interrogating those reasons with mentors or with coaches, if you have one, to help you really internalize why is it really that I want to make this transition. Some decisions are made on your behalf in the cases where you are laid off, or the job ends, or something happens to the organization. Those are outside of you, but what is within your control is really understanding why do you want to move, where do you want to move to, what are the circumstances around that kind of transition that you're considering. So a big challenge is just not being able to understand fully where you are and what you need to do, and exactly where your goals are in terms of your career journey. The other challenge that I would look at from an external point of view is that we have a very competitive market, which is something that we cannot avoid. There's a competitive market, and so it's like, how do you stand out in that competitive market? There's challenges around remuneration, where you have to think about where you like your target remuneration. What are you targeting to make in the new role? What are you making right now in the current role you're in? And how does that look like when you think of transitioning? Do you take a pay cut? Do you ask for more money? Do you ask for a bigger percentage? What does that look like? There's also challenges around job search, in terms of where do I look, who do I talk to, and job search comes in with its own set of challenges, where it's, you have to attend interviews, you have to do assignments if you're in an interview process. So there's all that comes with transitions, that would present itself as challenges, which I've categorized as, intrinsic, what is dependent on you, and then there's now what is external factors that are challenges that you can't control, but you can figure out how to navigate.
Okay, okay. So after we've done this and figured out this, the challenges that we could potentially face, and you're looking at it and trying to figure out, do I have the skill? Do I have the qualifications to move? Am I ready to move? What are some strategies that we can effectively use to assess our skills and qualifications before you make the move? Because you could make the move and then realize, hold up, I think a bit of more than I can chew. So, what strategies can we employ to prepare ourselves even before we make the move?
Mhm. Yeah, another very good question, because yeah, you definitely have to know what it looks like where you're moving to. So, for instance, you want to switch roles, or you want to switch organizations, or maybe you just want a different type of sector and all that. It's
Mhm,
important to do your research. You have to do your research. You have to look at, if it's a sector change, what does that sector look like for that specific type of role? Look at job descriptions in the market, in the region that you're in. What are the qualifications that are required? What are the skills that are required? What is the common theme that you're seeing when you look at this
mhm,
type of jobs in the organizations that you're targeting, or the roles that you're targeting, or the sector that you're targeting? Being able to do that helps you understand, okay, if if this is what this role requires in this type of organization, in this sector, then
mhm,
this is how I can better prepare myself to interview or to work in that particular space. So part of that assessment would mean, really digging deep into, when people say analytical thinking in the job description, what does it really
mhm,
mean? When people say critical thinking, or they want someone who's independent thinker, or an independent worker, or a self-driven or self-motivated individual, of course we understand what those definitions are at the basic value, but a bit at the basic level. But what does it
mhm,
really mean for for that particular organization, or in that particular sector? It could mean, the definitions are the same, but it could look differently in different types of scenarios. And so part of evaluating your skill would be, apart from looking at the job descriptions in the market, and the JDs are everywhere on job boards, different job boards which are accessible. The other thing you need to do in terms of assessing your skills and qualifications is assessment tests, and there are free assessment tests online.
mhm,
um, just to see, when it comes to leadership, if that role requires a leadership skill, what is my level, where am I at? If it requires a bit of analytical thinking, or analysis, data analysis, where is my skill at when it comes to that? But also it's important to look at where you are. If there are skills that are needed where you the skills that are needed where you want to go,
mhm,
and they're the same as where you are now, it's getting feedback from your colleagues in the workplace, and just ask them, what do you think? And of course, trusted people, what would you say is what are my strengths? And they'll tell you, okay, your strength is in this area and this area, and dig deep and say, what makes you say that? What scenarios have shown you that this particular skill is actually evident in my
mhm,
work? And from that, you get to gather, information about what your relevant experience and relevant skill set for that role that you're targeting. And that's usually feedback from people is raw, so it gives
mhm,
you like a very clear picture of where you really are at when it comes to your skills and qualifications. So there are, of course, assessment tools online, which, look at psychometrics or personality, really get to understand yourself, understand what your journey to this point in your career, what has that entailed? What have you achieved? What have been your
mhm,
struggles along the way? Like really do a deep dive into your skills from a fact-finding mission perspective, and that will help you really create a foundation so that it helps you to navigate in a in a different job. Because then if you're in an interview and you're asked to explain a particular skill set or a particular qualification or evidence of it, then you can quickly pick that up from your from your database in your mind, that I did this, I created dashboards at my organization, and it helped the decision makers to make decisions around finance or whatever, or programs, or whatever the case may be. So it's important to really assess yourself from the tools we have, but also just from your own experiences, and really tabulate them. And I'm a big believer in writing or typing. For those who don't write a lot, I believe in writing or just typing things out. Really tell your story to yourself, so that you can see that story from from you write the story for yourself and read it back to yourself and see, is this a compelling story? Is this something that someone would be convinced? Would I be convinced if I was told this about someone who's changing careers from one career to another? So that's how I would look at assessing skills and qualifications when you're considering a job change or a career change.
Okay, I like what you said about asking for feedback. And I'm looking at it from the point of Johari's window. You know, that part about yourself that you don't know about and you don't know that you don't know. But the
Yeah.
person outside looking in is like, yeah, maybe we need to work on this thing or the other. And asking for that feedback from peers, from junior colleagues, from senior colleagues, from your own manager really, really helps to take the, I call it lint off of your eyes
Yeah.
and give you a very, very clear picture of where you are standing and what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. And to add to that, also, I think also getting feedback on what does management think of you as talent in the business? What is your talent placement in the business? Really, really will help the conversation because it's easy to imagine you are top talent and maybe you're average, or it's easy to think you're not all that, but you're actually one of the very, very good ones in the business. And getting that feedback actually helps even to build confidence when you're trying to figure out, am I ready for the next move?
Yeah, yeah. And
My
I just want to add to that, is there's always a blind spot. Just what you said around the Johari's window. There's always a blind spot, and that blind spot is covered by getting feedback from others. And feedback is, sometimes it can be tough to swallow.
total.
So you have to be
Mm,
ready for whatever feedback you get, and then you go back and really evaluate and internalize that feedback and say, okay, um, this feedback has been given to me, how much of it is true? And really just be honest with yourself, because there's a part of ourselves that we can't see, how we present ourselves to the world, how we present ourselves to people. We may
mm,
think in a certain way, but there's a bias in terms of perception. That
yeah.
day you may have caught me in a bad mood, or I just had a bad day, and I feel like you're not a good person, or I felt like you didn't respond well. And so people are biased in their own way, but still the feedback that they give is important, because people view you when you present yourself to the world, and they have perceptions about you. So that feedback is
Mm,
critical when you're thinking about how to assess yourself and how to justify to an interviewer, and show evidence of areas where you have demonstrated certain qualifications or skills.
mm. So, thinking also, building on what Dorcas was telling us last week, thinking even from a star model, like what was the situation, what was your task, what was your action, what was the result? The feedback will also support on that, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so you've spoken about getting feedback from people, and you're most probably getting the feedback from people within your network, people you know, or either first level with interaction, or second level of interaction, or third level of interaction. So, my next question to you, Rose, would be, in your experience, what role does networking play in successfully navigating career transitions, and how can we leverage our networks effectively?
Wow. So I love networking. I think the people who know me know that I love networking. And I see it as a really good tool um, to to grow. it's a good tool to grow, whichever way you look at it, whether it's in business or it's in your career. It's a good tool to grow. Why? Because when you interact with people, whether in formal or informal settings, they get to see you and get to know you. So if, say, we are at an event, maybe it's a conference and I meet you and we start talking and you tell me, okay, I'm Nolene, I'm a supply chain professional, etc. And then I'll tell you, I'm a recruiter, I work in these sectors. And in that conversation, we'll get to discuss some of the things that we are passionate about or some of the things that we work on a day-to-day basis. And
Mhm.
through that conversation, um, depending on how we present ourselves to each other, and of course, there's pressure, but there's no pressure usually in those conversations. But really, you
Mhm.
want to leave an impression. You want someone to actually think, oh wow, it was really nice to meet Noeline. I would really love to connect with her, in future. And what you'll find is that in those conversations, at some point in the future, someone will call you and be like, we met 5 years ago, or we met 2 years ago, we met a month ago, and you mentioned that you do supply chain. I need help in this area. Or do you know someone who's looking for a role in supply chain? Maybe you can recommend. And
Yeah.
literally, that is how networking helps. You can be recommended to someone else who's looking. That person that you're talking to may actually be in need of a particular role. Um, and so there's a book I was reading, I think 2 years ago, called
Mhm.
Design Your Life by a guy called Bill and Dave, the two of them. And in that
Mhm.
book, it was talking about they really, part of the book was about how to change jobs, like navigating career changes and all that, and job search strategies and all that. And a big thing that they mentioned is that networking, you
Let
cannot
me
avoid
repeat that in
networking.
chat.
Networking
Mhm.
is an important aspect um, of growth. And growth in the sense that if you're looking for business, then you network. If you're looking for a job, then you network. Why? Because in those conversations, as you're networking, people are building connections and making connections such that if someone is looking for something, they can easily remember you. And a very easy example is, for instance, if you're like, for us ladies, we are big on
Mhm.
hair. It will be like, Rose, where did you get your hair done? And Nolene be like, okay. And then I'll tell you, I got my hair done in this place.
Mm.
And then when you're ready, you'll come back to me and say, could you give me the contact to the person who did your hair? And that's how just business is generally. And that's how you can boost your network, boost your career change or career transition journey by really
Mm.
just talking to people. And networking can be as easy as going on LinkedIn, really searching for the organizations that you're targeting, or the type of organizations you're looking at. Um,
Mhm.
Maybe pick out someone who would potentially be an expert in that area, in that organization, and just connecting with them. Say, hey, I am currently navigating transition. Or you can figure out a way to introduce yourself and just say, could I have 15 minutes of your time to get some insights on a particular theme? Or if you're really searching for a role, you could even speak to HR guys and just say, I'm currently looking for a role in this and this area. So that's one way of networking. But also networking physically, so that's like online, physically, where you meet people and talk to people, identify places where the organization you're targeting, where do they hang out? Where do they go? What do they talk about? And really just immersing yourself in that, so that then
Mm.
it gives you, it catapults you to be able to, next level. It's like you're being reached out to because you've really aced your networking game,
Mm.
so that's how I would look at networking.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for mentioning that. I think you've covered it so well, so broadly. The only thing I'd add is I think mentoring and sponsorship are two avenues of networking that we usually take very little advantage of, if I could put it that way. And when I think about it from a sponsorship point of view, and there's this book that I read last year. It's written by Francine Parham. It's called Please Sit Over There. Very good book. I recommend it to everyone. And when I'm doing mentorship, I tell the people I'm mentoring, go find the book. It's available on Amazon. And what she was saying was when performance reviews are being done, when leadership is talking about who are we promoting this season? Some of the if there's nobody in the room who has anything to say about you, or anybody in the room who cannot add to what your manager is saying about you, what they do is your name is taken and it's put on a, like just put their name somewhere over there on a board. We'll circle back to it, and then nobody ever remembers to circle back to your name. But if you have a sponsor, which is, and this is one of the things that Francine speaks about in her book, if you have a sponsor, you have somebody within your network who can actually speak about you in the room when you're not in the room. And you'll find sometimes it's even the mentors and the sponsors who can recommend you for a job transition or a new role, or even totally different job opportunity. So I hear you when you talk about networking, connecting with people. Interesting that you spoke about hair, because the person who does my hair was a referral, and I've referred her to even more people. So very interesting that you use the example of hair. Now, we will dwell on hair. Let's move on to the next one. But thank you for giving that example. So after we've done all this, I have done the assessment. I figured out, yeah, and maybe I'm ready to move, but I'm not so sure if I want to move. What advice would you give to the person who is unsure about which career path they want to pursue next? Because there are people who get into a slump in their career, there are people who stagnate in their careers, and then thinking, okay, on one side, you're like, I want to move, I'm not sure where I want to go. And the other person is like, yeah, this is a dead end, but they're not sure where to go. What advice would you have for the two groups of people?
Okay, so I think when you're unsure, it still goes back to the first challenge that we mentioned, that one of the biggest challenges is being unclear. Because when you're unclear or unsure, there's really no step you can take at that point when you're unsure. Like, you can't make that bold move or that risky step. But that said, in the midst of, just the uncertainty and the lack of and being unsure of whether you should move or not move, where to move, I think
Mhm,
it's important to, and I keep insisting on going back to really evaluating yourself, because when you're having those inner conversations, or when you're at work on a day-to-day basis, what are those things that irk you? What are those things that you find yourself saying, I wish I could do this? Or you talk to someone and you say, I wish I could do this. And I think it's important to just tabulate, like, list down all those possibilities that could be there for you in those moments of quiet when you're thinking, or just those random thoughts that come across your mind, um, about about work. You'd be like, I would really have loved to do data analysis. I would really have loved to be a developer, even if it sounds, to you it may sound absurd, but I think on your path to being sure, it's important to recognize some of those passing thoughts, those passing inner conversations, and just jot them down. And after a time, maybe search for common themes that you're seeing in your in your list of things. Maybe you're seeing a common theme around a specific sector. You're seeing a common
mhm,
theme around a specific skill set. You're seeing a common
mhm,
theme around a specific type of role. And those nuances can help you figure out, okay, what would be the next thing? Um, maybe it's to volunteer at an organization that needs help. Maybe it will be to study, to maybe add a professional certificate or a course, or maybe do your masters or do your PhD. Like, it's out of those nuances. What are those nuances telling you? Do you need to study some more? Do you need to increase in terms of your skills, and how do you do that where you are right now? If you're already attached to a role, how
mhm,
do you make sure that you utilize that role to build on certain skills that you're identifying as things that you'd really want to do or want to become? And there are organizations that allow you to explore, of course, within the limits of the HR policy. But can you be able to get opportunities where you can explore certain skill sets that you are interested in? So your interests really play a big part
mhm,
in identifying where you want to move next. Of course, there are the motivations as to why you want to move is also a factor, but I think the starting point is to really figure out what are those things that when I'm having conversations with myself or with other people, what are those things that jump at me, that could make me want to explore that further. Then you actually do research on that area and now dig deeper. What type of roles exist in this particular path? And really just do a lot of research and a lot of introspection.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. I'm writing down, thinking about it slowly as we move.
Yeah.
So, Rose, I think the question I'd ask next is: are there specific industries or roles that are more conducive to successful career transitions? And if so, what makes them stand out? I'm thinking of this from the point of roles that are very technical skill oriented and you want to move from or to such a role. What are your thoughts on this?
Um, that's a very interesting question because I think it really is dependent on where you are at in your journey. Because I do have a friend who transitioned from, she was doing hospitality, and later on in her 30s, she did she said she wanted to be a lawyer, an advocate of the high court. And so she started her journey at that point. And so you see, that meant that she would do 5 or 6 years in, to study in law school and go to Kenya School of Law, and then now start, pupillage and all that. There's that she had to do. I don't think there's anything wrong with moving to a technical role. The thing is, are you ready for that? Are you ready for what it will take to say be change from one technical capability to another technical capability? And of course, the common technical skill sets or paths, so to speak. You're thinking around the finance track, or you're thinking around the, if you want to move to sales, or you want to now, move to law, or you want to uh, become a doctor. What does that look like when it comes to the journey to get there? And are you ready for what it will take to get there? Because there are those that it will take you, if you're transitioning to maybe a role like sales, it's much shorter because it's just dependent on how aggressive you are, if you're able to hit your target and generate those sales leads and all that. But then if you're looking at a more complex path like now law, it means that then you have to go back to school and and do your bachelor's and your 4 years or 3 years, and then add and do pupillage and almost become an intern, and like really start from the beginning. So the question would be, are you ready for that? If you're ready for that, then go for it. But just know that it is not a one size fits all, and it's not a very it's not a
Linear.
quick fix. Yeah, it's not a quick fix journey. You have to actually do
Mm.
the work. You have to be committed to the path, and it will take time if you're transitioning between two different technical sort of like career paths. But there are those that have transferable skills where you can now take advantage of those transferable skills into a new role, and it makes sense for you to take up a new role that's different from what you were doing before.
Okay, so when we talk about learning and figuring out just how much rereading, relearning I'm going to need to do, can you discuss the significance of continuous learning and upskilling in the context of career transition? It could be not necessarily that I'm doing a complete switch over to a totally different industry, but it could even be I want to move from operations to strategy. I want to move from uh, joining level, entry level to the next level of management. What would you define as the significance of continuous learning and upskilling to support the whole journey of career transitions?
Wow. Learning never stops. And we live in a world where for you to stand out, you must be open to learning. You must be open to to discovering new ways of thinking, discovering new ways of doing things, discovering new ways of, in your craft. Because a lot in the world is changing, and it's changing rapidly. You know, before, you know, back in the day we had, for instance, we had you had to go to a supermarket or a retail store to buy stuff. Right now, you can do it from the comfort of your phone and the comfort of your home. You can be in the
Mm,
office and just, make an order and it goes straight to your house. So things have changed, and so if we stick to what we know, it will become outdated and we will become irrelevant. So the
mm,
importance of continuous learning is really it improves your relevance, but also gives you an edge in your career journey, because concepts are changing because life is changing. We always talk
mm,
of Gen X, Gen Z, Alpha. Things are changing across those different demographics, and so if you're not open to learning new things, it will just be you. There's no growth in that. There's no growth when it comes to next level in your career. If you're looking at a senior role or a more senior role
mm,
or a board level role, um, but you have to be really open to learning, and learning looks different in different scenarios. Learning could be, or upskilling could be, where you actually go to school and do a course, which is like classroom or online studies. It could be actually going to a to a place and doing the work and learning that way, like active learning on the job, active
on the job.
learning when you're in your day to day. And so learning could look differently for different people. And so it's defining what that looks like for you, but really realizing that the key to being relevant and to standing out and to really progressing is literally learning and growth and having a growth mindset.
Okay. So we've spoken about how do you assess yourself, how do you prepare for it. So, and the good side of the transition and the changing. But there must be a side also of pitfalls that we need to be cognizant of and we need to prepare ourselves for. So, in your opinion, what are some potential pitfalls to avoid when transitioning between careers, and how can individuals mitigate these risks?
Um, so it's helpful to do your research, as I've mentioned before. Do your research to reduce the level of surprises you get
Mm,
in your new role. And doing research could mean talking to people who've been in such a type of role before, and people are always willing to talk. I mean, if someone reached out to me and asked me a question, even on LinkedIn, I usually just say, I usually respond. Very few people will be okay, let me not say very few people. It's always good to um
mhm,
ask for help and ask for insights, because that's the only way you'll know about things. You'll have information. So information is good. Do your research where possible, where you have access. Talk to people who've been in similar positions or been in that type of organization you're looking for. That way it prepares you for what to expect. The other thing is that when you're transitioning from one role to another or one career path to another, um,
mhm,
keep an open mind. I think sometimes when we have very many expectations, you find that where you what you had in mind and the assumptions you made when you were getting into this role or getting into this job, you didn't have full information. And so I would say keep an open mind.
mm,
When you actually make that transition, keep an open mind, because you could get surprises. Life is generally full of surprises, and so are jobs, and so are roles, and so are you know those places we look at from the outside and think, oh wow, that looks so amazing. Then when you get in there, you realize, oh my god, I
not
really
so
didn't know
much.
that this is how. Yeah, this is not. I didn't realize this is really good, but I didn't realize what it takes to actually be in this type of role. So it's important to do your research. It's important to talk to people, and it's important to. And those are some of the pitfalls you could avoid. And then it's important to keep an open mind. That is,
Mm,
a growth mindset. And I think that's one of the biggest competencies that many organizations and many people look for, just that growth mindset, because you really never know what you find on the other side. But you can have general overview, general idea of what that place
mm.
looks like. But again, unless you are in there, is when you realize, okay, this is how things
What's
work.
really
This
going
is
on?
what I need to learn. The other thing is really have regular check-ins with yourself where you're saying, I joined, maybe I started this role at this level. What would it look like 2 years from now, or six, not even 2 years, 3 months from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, and really doing those checks along the way to see how you're faring. That way,
Mhm.
you're really in control to some extent of how your growth is progressing in the new place or in the new role.
I like what you've said because I feel like what you've said and what the previous speakers have been saying kind of ties into one storyline, if I could call it that way. We had Sami on at the very beginning, and one of the things Sami was saying was if you don't know what the culture of an organization that you want to join is, reach out to HR consultants like yourself, like Dorcas, like Sami, and find out because HR people have a community, HR professionals have a community where you guys know each other and you know what the culture in a certain organization looks like. And if I, for example, let me use myself as an example. If I'm looking to move and I reach out to Rose and I say, Rose, I'm thinking of moving to organization X. What do you know about this organization? It will really help with exactly what you're talking about, potential disappointment and disillusionment after you've joined the organization. And interestingly, this is also something that one of the responders to the forms questionnaires raised, because they were saying that they joined this new organization and they realized that the culture in the new organization is very different from the culture that they were coming from. And they were in this space of what do I do? But and I think for that feeds into what you're saying and also feeds into what the therapist was saying, Grace Karaoke, interestingly enough, on how do we manage change. And even adding on to what you're saying, that document, like journal for yourself at the end of the day. This is what is going on. Offload, like take it off your mind so you are able to, how do you say, reassess yourself when you're a lot more calmer. Thank you for adding on to that. At least it's making sense as we move along. Now that I'm hearing all the subject matter experts are kind of saying the same thing as we move. Thank you so much for that. My second last question, Rose, is can you share a success story or an example of someone who has navigated a career transition successfully and what lessons, can be learned from their experiences?
Yeah, I think I'll just allude to the example I gave earlier of my friend who was doing business consultancy and had done a bit of hospitality, and then for a couple of years, and then realized, I think I really want to be a lawyer. I wanted to be a lawyer, and I want
Mhm,
to pursue this. And she started what you'd consider, entry level. She started her first year bachelor's in law, um, I think in her late 20s. Um, and she had a family actually at that point. And so she's now, years later, many years later, she's now really a super lawyer. She's doing great. She has, grown in
mhm,
her career. She's taken up very many different types of roles. And I think what I would say from that journey, because she transitioned successfully, I would say. And
mhm,
the lessons that I would say I picked from that journey is resilience. She was very
mhm,
resilient. Because can you imagine that you are first year student with, um, guys who are way younger than you, and you have to do group discussions, and you have to work together on assignments and present together. And in terms of like um experience level, you're way here, and then these are guys who've just finished high school or just a few years after high school because they've joined uni. And so
mhm,
navigating that, I think, needed a lot of resilience. And also because at that level you're trying to hustle, you're trying to raise your family and all that. Definitely that comes with its own, demands or like responsibilities. And so I think she really, for me, the biggest lesson is resilience and just really sticking to the commitment you've made to yourself to become that thing. And she had a
mhm,
goal. And so when you do have that goal and it's very clear, then you just you're patient in the journey, you commit to the journey, you put your everything into the journey. Because even on a side, like if you're going back to school, things like assignments, you take them seriously, you do them well, to perfection where possible. If it's, attending class, you attend class. Whether you're doing your master's or your PhD, you attend class and you commit to that, and you really open up your mind to learning and to deep diving into this journey that you've decided to take. And so I think that commitment, that resilience, and just sticking to the path. And of course, it was not easy. It's never easy. It's never perfect. But really, just sticking to that path, I think, is something that I've picked from people who've navigated transitions. Another big thing is being willing to take the risk of talking to people and just laying it bare as it is, and saying, okay, this is where I was in this field, now I'm transitioning to this field, what do you think? And just being open and vulnerable in some cases. I've seen that also, as something, worth learning from those who've taken those big leaps in terms of career transitions.
Mm, okay. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Rose. So, what are your parting thoughts, your last words of advice for our session today, as far as navigating through career transitions goes?
Um, yeah, transitions are part of life. As I think that's the first thing that I started by saying. Transitions are part of life, and so career transitions are still, part of life. Be gracious with yourself in the journey, but be committed to the journey, whatever that looks like for you. Whether it's, whether you're transitioning because whether your transition journey looks like studying to get there, or looks like working in a particular role for a few months, a few years to get there, or you've had maybe some redundancy happening, whatever that looks like. I think be gracious with yourself, but also put in the work that will take you to get to the next level. You have to put in the work, you have to put in the time. Those are my parting shots.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rose, for taking the time to take us through this. I think my highlights are: do your due diligence, self-assessment. Do I have the capacity, the skill, and the qualifications to move? Look for feedback, request for the feedback from peers and from managers. Those are my two highest takeaways during this session, and a lot of introspection, if I've understood you correctly, goes into making the decision. Do I want to move? Am I ready to move? And where do I want to move to? So thank you so much for giving of your time, giving of your knowledge, giving of your wisdom this evening. I appreciate it. And on behalf of my audience, thank you. Thank you so much. That said, have a lovely weekend. My goodness, I'm already in weekend mode.
Thank you for having me, and have a lovely rest of the week.
You too. Bye, Rose. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye, everyone.